In this episode, we're going to talk addiction, but I want to bring in awareness to addiction because most people have a stereotypical idea of what an addict is. And their stereotypical idea of what an addict is these extreme versions of individuals whose lives have become unmanageable with illegal substances or substances that are socially acceptable. But socially acceptable addictions are of great concern because 80% of homes today are experiencing mental health or addiction in their immediate or extended families. And I feel like if we include cell phone addictions, which we must include, that number is even higher. That's something to think about. I mean, addiction is just an inability to process an emotional trauma or process emotions, communicate about emotions. So we attach to things external from us to help us distract from those feelings or to feel something else. You know, a lot of people that use food as an addiction, they eat because they don't want to think about something or they want to feel anything other than that feeling that doesn't have them feel well. So they turn to food to feel something else. And then they create a pattern and a habit. And that pattern and that habit turns into an addiction. So therefore, the human has created a way to distract itself from feeling something uncomfortable by using something external from them. There's individuals who like to compare their lives to those that are on the street whose lives have become unmanageable. But really, that individual has an emotional trauma that is so great that they need something to be able to distract them from feeling that uncomfortable feeling. I was one of those individuals. For 23 years, I practiced active addiction, and I chose all of the drugs. I started out my journey using marijuana, and marijuana didn't do it for me, so I tried mushrooms. Mushrooms really weren't the effect of distracting from my feeling or an inability to communicate about a feeling that I needed, so I tried acid. Same thing, it didn't work for me. Ecstasy is where I moved to next. That didn't work either. But I was kind of going in the right direction because the drugs were becoming more powerful. So therefore, I was disconnecting from myself at a greater length of time. So from acid, I moved to cocaine. And I stayed with cocaine, using cocaine heavily for a number of years. From cocaine, I moved to heroin. And heroin, you know, stereotypically, it comes with many ideas. But for me, it was a way that I could disconnect from that feeling, that inability to communicate about how I was feeling about a traumatic experience in my life. You know, if you look at drugs in that sense, like we don't really know what an individual is going through. So when the media portrays a lineup of individuals that are homeless outside of a shelter and there's nowhere for them to live, rather than look at the stereotypical idea of what drug addiction is, take a look at the human. I mean, we don't know what that human had to go through in order to stick needles in its arm or use fentanyl on a day-to-day basis or use methamphetamines. We don't know what they're distracting from in their life. But I want you to take for a second and imagine what a human went through to have to live that kind of lifestyle. Because nobody wants that. Nobody wakes up one day in this human experience and thinks it's going to be a great idea to be a drug addict to the point where you're homeless on the street, begging for change, begging for food, begging for somebody to just see and hear you. That's the result of a lack of education, emotional education, to be able to communicate about how we feel. And it's my belief that addictions are all centralized around an emotional traumatic experience or an inability to communicate about how we feel. And it's important to just see past that. You know, as human beings, like who are we to compare ourselves with somebody who has less? That's how we see each other. That's the value we see each other for. So many times throughout my drug addiction, when I was in just a dark place, people would often say to me, "Get a job, loser." You know, and they had no idea what I had been through to end up on the street. What took me to get me to that place? I lost everything. Yes, that was the result of my own choice, but I never had the education I needed in order to communicate about how I feel and learn from the traumatic experiences that I went through. They never taught us that in school. They taught us that we'd better understand that we're never going to be able to afford anything, and you're going to go to a job that you're going to be overworked, undervalued, and underappreciated, and definitely you will be underpaid. So I was aware of that at a very young age. So that whole system that the education system was trying to have me be a part of wasn't really fitting with the emotional education that I needed at that time, because work wasn't a way I was choosing to distract from my inability to communicate about how I was feeling. The job wasn't doing it for me. So my journey led me down this drug-addicted path of very difficult lessons in my life, all because I couldn't speak my truth. And that's usually the result of us trying to talk about the things that hold us back, is just the ability to speak our truth. But then it's really helpful to be able to have perspective shared with us so we can see that traumatic experience from another way. And I talk about that in the previous episodes, how to see your emotional trauma from another way. One of the ways that I viewed my emotional traumas was to see it from the point of education. I mean, it already had happened in the past, so I couldn't change it. So the experiences that I went through in my life, I had to learn from that. Like, what was the lesson within that? And once I found that lesson, I was set free because I could let the past go. And a lot of people say, well, how do you let go? Well, you got to make peace with it. And to make peace with the past, you've got to figure out a way to learn something from it. I mean, that way you can take something from it and leave it where it is. And that's very important when we're talking about addiction, because more often than not, the things that we are distracting from in the present moment are found in the past. That's what we're running from, is our past. And then as we go through life and we compound more traumas on top of that root core issue, life becomes just a mess. So it's easier to just distract than it is to look at everything that we're not looking at from the last however many years. I was 36 when I woke up in jail and decided that I was going to love myself. I also talk about that in the previous episodes of what I did to ask love into my life. I think it's very personal how we choose to ask for something to come in our life. But I also want to remind you that that is a power. If we ask for something to come into our life because, we just are trying to remember this thing called love, it will come. And that's a conversation we're just not having, is the ability to remember and to ask to remember something that we have forgotten. Most people have not been taught self-love, self-care. And it's interesting when we think about self-love and self-care, because often we're taught to value things external from us, right? Clothing, materialism, money, like job titles, all these things are external from us. But the most priceless things we can find in life are found within. And in order to love another individual or love anything in this life, we must first understand love within ourselves and love for ourselves. Because if we understand these two things, then we're able to share that love as an understanding versus a feeling with other people. And love is the thing that helped me out of my addiction. I never had to go to recovery. I never went to any groups. I literally used my life as an experiment from the point of me asking love into my life. I knew I was going to make mistakes along the way, but one mistake I wasn't going to make was using drugs again, because I'd made peace with it. I knew that I didn't have to use drugs to figure out who I was, because the drugs were pulling me away from myself. Same can be said for alcohol. The same can be said for food, exercise, video games, social media, cell phone, whatever you're using as a distraction. These things pull you further away from connecting to that root source, that traumatic experience, or whatever it is that has you attached to something external from you. That's a disconnection. So if we can see that, we can begin to journey within ourselves again, because I knew that using drugs would only pull me further away from my truth. And I wasn't about to let anything come between me and my truth, because the truth is what sets us free. And that's just a reality. When I chose love, to understand loving myself, and I asked love into my life, that meant that I was going to learn what it meant to live a truthful life. And I'll tell you, as a drug addict, my life was filled with lies. I lied about everything because I was constantly trying to hide something that I wasn't proud of. So I never wanted to let anybody down. I mean, I was visually a mess. More often than not, I was a mess. Even though I was able to maintain a job, I was still a mess. So I was only lying to myself. So that was a key element in me living in love, was no longer lying to myself, because it didn't matter if I was lying to anyone else, because you always lie to yourself first. So this is relevant for any addiction. We must be truthful with ourselves and be okay with living in the truth, because again, the past has already happened. So it's just there to teach you something. Blame and victim mentality will hold you in the past, and it will hold you in a place where you won't move forward. That's why we keep making the same mistakes over and over again. Those that are trying to quit something are using that as an excuse to keep using whatever it is, whatever the distraction is: video games, social media, drugs, alcohol, whatever, pick it. You choose to do that. You choose to distract, and you choose to continue lying to yourself, because it's difficult to try and live in the truth, because we're being brought up in a society where pretending to be somebody you're not is totally acceptable these days, which is why we're seeing more addiction cases happen in regular homes that just, they're not experiencing physical or sexual abuse. They're not experiencing abandonment. They're not experiencing these traumatic ideas that we have about emotional traumas. I think it's important to talk about that as well. What does an emotional trauma look like? Because there's a stereotypical idea surrounding emotional traumas. And I think this has people confused, that they've been brought up in a good life, they had good parents, they had materialism, they had school, they had clothing, they had food, but still they feel this thing that was missing within them. And therefore that thing that was missing breaks them down over time, because they're not sure where to look for it or what it is. But an emotional trauma can just be not being seen, not being heard. And for many, it's not having an individual tell you they love you or giving you a hug. And that has us missing the very thing that we come here to learn about: love as a collective. So an emotional trauma is just whatever's traumatic to the human. That's personal. There is no comparison. For me, it was just not being able to talk about how I was feeling. I stored those feelings deep within me, and I never talked about them. And if a feeling is energy, and we don't transmute that energy, we don't process it, then the body stores it. And when the body stores it, it breaks us down. It holds us down. That's why most people that are not well are feeling low, because it's a low vibrational feeling when we don't process energy. It holds us down, breaks us down. And for most, that feeling has us so low that we feel we need to reach for something external from us that society has provided. Even illegal drugs, pharmaceuticals, food, video games, social media. That's why they're there. They're there to distract us from the power that we hold within. And that power is truth. So that is the key element in unlocking you from your addiction, whatever it may be. Just accepting the truth that you don't have it all figured out or you don't have the education. And that's okay. And if this podcast today is finding you, I'm so grateful for that. Really, I am. Because this is how we share. This is how we grow. This is just my personal experience of what I've learned from a 23-year drug addiction. I spent 16 years with a needle. I was homeless on the streets. I lost my kids. And people ask me about that, losing my kids. And my kids didn't die. I have 3 beautiful children, 2 with one girl and 1 with another girl. I lost them because I didn't have the education to break free from my cycle. I wasn't ready to live in my truth. I was a good father. And for many, people that are in addiction, they're not, some are bad parents for sure. because they don't know how to be a parent, and others try to be a good parent, but this emotional inability to communicate about traumatic experiences, it's so great, and you feel like you can't talk about it with anyone, and you've created this pattern, this habit, this addiction, and this addiction is working for you, right? Because I don't know where to find a teacher to talk about how I'm feeling. So I'm just going to stay inside of this addiction, but I got kids now. So I'm going to try and be a good father, and I'm still going to use, and I'm going to try and balance it, and things become unbalanced because the addiction always comes first. No matter what, it has a consciousness of its own. It wants to be fed, and it is the thing you end up living for. Even though you create beautiful children who mean the world to you, I didn't love myself, so I couldn't love them. And that's pretty relevant for many people within addiction. And I wanted to talk about that because, that throws a lot of people into a darker space, and it did myself as well. I used losing my kids or having them taken away from me for many, many years. And it just put me lower and lower within a lower vibrational feeling. And I lost more and more. Ultimately, that was the best thing that happened to me because I had eventually found a place that I was so low that I lost myself. And when I lost myself, I knew this isn't who I am. I knew I needed to ask for love into my life. I was reading a book, and the book was about a biker who had a very similar life, and that's what he had done. So it worked for him. So, he just offers it as a source of a source of information for us to try, anyone who was reading the book. And I tried it, and it worked for me to ask love into my life and help me remember what love was. And all these wonderful realizations came in that the past is the past, leave it there, learn from it, and let it go. The future hasn't happened yet, so it doesn't matter. The only way you can manifest your future to be the very reality you want to live in is by affecting the present moment. So be the human you want to be today, because yesterday has already happened. So when I woke up in jail with this feeling of love, this whole new understanding, I'd let go of the 23-year addiction right then and there. I knew I wasn't that person anymore because I had the information and the education to be able to let go of it and just learn from it and see how all of those lessons, those difficult lessons, were going to work for me in the present moment by being a better human, by living in a higher vibrational frequency. So no matter what experience I faced along my journey, from that point forward, I was never going to have to use drugs as a way to distract from feeling because I was just going to talk about how I was feeling in any situation because I knew the inability to talk about how I was feeling is what kept me within that emotional, repetitive cycle to choose to distract by using an addiction from myself. So rather than disconnect from myself, I chose to connect with myself. We all have that power. So it's just a way to see addiction, right? And I know that the shelters are becoming more and more at a breaking point these days, and the news elements are starting to pick it up. I actually am working with a program for the Government of Canada for community living programs, which is programs that see generally people with less. And I'm able to talk about mental health and addiction and how I was able to overcome the things that held me back throughout my life. So I'm able to use this as a tool to help other people today because I mean it's incredible that I'm still here, but more incredible that I learned so much from it. And this education can be applied in more than just people standing out a lineup for a shelter to have a place to stay, because I want people to know that we're not that different from each other. And that is the power to be able to live in truth, to stop judging each other on our external appearances or for bank accounts or for materialism or for brands. Like everyone has a story. Like it's more important to learn about the story than it is to just judge a book by its cover. And I think that that's the thing we should be learning in school. How to see each other as brothers and sisters, because it's important. The world is becoming more and more divided and more disconnected, and we're trying to attach to anything external to see each other as different, when really everybody around the world feels. Everybody around the world has emotional traumas. That's why an alcoholic is an alcoholic in the West, the same as it is in the East. And usually the thing that brought the human to become an alcoholic is one and the same. So if we remove, these labels such as a Russian or an American, and we see each other as human beings, we have a way to really correlate the two from an internal perspective where everything matters. But we're not talking about that. Seeing each other from the inside, seeing each other as vessels of light, high vibrational or low vibrational. That's how I see human beings. You're high vibrational or you're low vibrational. And if you're low vibrational, you know what? I build up enough self-love within myself that I can offer you some of my high vibrational frequency, because I can see you, I can hear you, I can speak my truth, and I can listen to your truth. And together we can share perspectives to hopefully teach each other something and help each other grow. That to me is everything in life. Bank accounts and money is just a tool of control. It really just teaches us to value something external from us. And I want to give you an example. A child in Mexico or a child in America. The child in Mexico doesn't have money in the bank account. Therefore, society views this child as being less. The child in America has money in the bank account and is able to go to a school of its choice. So therefore, society views this child as being valuable. But the one in Mexico is not valuable because it was born into a family that has no money. How can that even be? Money is not the thing that offers value to human beings. And I talk about that, talking about addiction, because it's this one and the same. We don't know what that human possesses on the inside, where everything actually matters. We're seeing the human for what they are on the outside, or what they are experiencing on the outside. That's more important, to talk about it in that way. Because once you break that down and you see we're not everybody deserves the chance to be, to offer value to society. There's just often emotions that are obstructing the journey. And it's my purpose in this life to try and help us understand what communication can do, and communication to self first. The only person that's going to help you evolve from one place to another is you. You first must be willing to accept change in your life. And that's very difficult for people that are in a repetitive cycle to do, because the habit is the thing that you're living for. So to break free from, 20, 30, 40, 50 years of doing the same thing is not an easy thing to do. But let me tell you something. Doing difficult things in this life gives you the greatest rewards. Like Struggling is amazing for human development, because those lessons that you learn through that struggle, they stay with you for life. So encourage struggling within the youth. Please, parents these days are trying to take everything away from their child and create this helicopter parenting or this bubble parenting where they don't even let them fall down, get dirty, or make mistakes. It's like if a child doesn't make mistakes, it's going to go through life thinking that everything is just going to happen for it. And it doesn't work that way. We've got to struggle in this life. We've got to make mistakes. That's what makes us better. That's why some people are really good at things in life, is because they've made so many mistakes that they mastered that thing that they were trying to get good at by making those mistakes. We have to do that in everyday life as well. So on this journey of truth, if you accept this journey of truth, I allowed myself from that moment when I accepted love into my life to make mistakes, because I knew it was going to be a part of life. I no longer needed to attach to the distraction or the addiction in my life when making mistakes, because I knew where that would take me. And I was done with that road. Me personally, I was okay with feeling difficult feelings from that point forward, because I knew those feelings were going to teach me something about myself. So rather than hide from them, I needed to see them. I needed to feel them. And that was something I hadn't practiced for many, many, many years. But I decided to do it. Was it easy? No, it wasn't. But it became very easy, very quick, because I practiced it and I talked about it. And I talk about it in this way. You don't have to communicate about it in front of a camera or on a podcast, but you can certainly communicate it to the people around you. And if the people around you aren't reciprocating your truth, you need to find a new community. And does that mean there will be a period of loneliness or stillness? Absolutely. Because that stillness is there to teach you something about yourself. Being alone with yourself It's a very valuable tool in this life. One of the reasons we don't want to be alone with ourselves is because we feel we need to be accepted by everybody else, external from us. If we're not accepted by people external from us, we'll feel lonely. But that moment of stillness, or that place of stillness, is for you to accept yourself in your entirety. I hide nothing from nobody. Like, when people meet me, they know me. Like, they know that I was a drug addict. They know the losses I've had in my life, because it doesn't define me, but it certainly is a part of me, right? That was 23 years of my life, is a long time. So it definitely helped shape the human I am. And often when I tell people about that journey, they can't believe it. They're like, there's no way that you went through that. And I said, yeah. But I chose to learn about love, and I chose to learn about light. And the more I learn and the more I become a student of life, the higher the vibrational frequency I emit. So I have this light surrounding me that people are just naturally attracted to, because I don't live with judgment. I don't judge others, and I don't judge myself. I take people for who they are, and if I meet people that are in a lower vibrational state, I allow it. I mean, I don't know what this individual is going through throughout the day, so I don't allow that to affect myself. Now, that came with an immense amount of practice, and life is still a practice for me. I learn every single day, but this is part of the journey. This is part of the evolution. And I'm talking about this because I want to remind people 80% of homes are experiencing mental health or addiction in their immediate or extended family. So everything that I just spoke about right there is not just for drug addiction, alcoholism, or anything that has a life become unmanageable. Because food, exercise, work, video games, cell phones, these are all socially acceptable distractions that have our lives become unmanageable in socially acceptable ways. So all of the things that I talked about in this episode can be applied to anybody who is using a pattern of thinking, a habit, a distraction from feeling or processing an emotional trauma or an emotion. Living with truth, living with love is the answer. And as I move forward with these podcast episodes, and you can hear them in the previous episodes as well, we're going to talk more about this. I'm just trying to get better at this, and I took a few weeks to really reconnect with myself, because that happens for me too. Like, I feel like when this, like stepping up to a microphone, I'm drained or it's becoming work. I got to take a step back, and I got to evaluate myself and really push myself out of my boundaries or out of my comfort zone again. And it's okay to do that. You know what I mean? I don't do this because I have to. I do this because I want to. And I want to do that at the right time. And I appreciate the listeners, everybody who's been amazing to me and listening to the podcast episodes, for your patience and your understanding and your practice in your own life. Because I've learned that people are evolving by applying some of the things that I talk about in their own life, in their own way. Because what worked for me may not work for you, but I might just plant a seed that you can see something from a different way. So that's what I intend to do with this podcast, and that's what this is all about. And I just want to take it to a place where we can hit more hearts and raise the vibrational frequency around the globe, because seeing each other as different is just something that has to come to an end. And life is becoming more difficult as the days pass. So bringing us together in ways that we can associate with each other from the internal perspectives, everything that we carry, this love that we all have, is the way that I'd like to try and, help us come together before things get much worse. So I love y'all for listening to my stuff, and just taking time like for yourself and applying anything into your own life. So much love. My social media is Real Talk for an Unreal World. That's Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube. My Twitter is Real Talk 4 Unreal, and my Gmail is realtalk4anunrealworld@gmail.com. If you have any questions or anything like that, just hit me up. I'm just a real human who's been through some things, and I help people. I try, I do my best, to just have conversations and see if we can grow from one point to another. That's kind of everything for me in this life. What else is there to do with a life than to help each other grow? Because I grew money in my bank account at one point and it just didn't do it for me. So I found value in this other manner for sure. So much love.